We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything.
The top floors collapsed down.
Our way of life, our very freedom came under attack.
9/11 changed everything.
The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women.
There wasn't anything that he wouldn't do for somebody else.
Moms and dads.
I like to think that she's my guardian angel.
Friends and neighbors.
Every one of us that went there in hope of finding somebody.
It was devastating for our community.
I can't stop feeling sad.
I can't control anything.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
September 11th, 2001. The unimaginable happened. Nearly 3,000 lives lost. On this day, we look back with wisdom and move forward with hope. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Williams. 20 years ago, Barbara Edwards boarded American Airlines Flight 77. Her life ended a short time later at the Pentagon. This is her untold story through the eyes of her son, her family, and her godson, our own Brad Edwards. Barbara Edwards was the aunt of our CBS 2 investigator and main anchor. We asked him to tell her story.
In the middle of Michigan farmland at Lakeview Cemetery, where there's no lake in view, there's a headstone with a date on it, 9/11/2001. Here lies Barbara Edwards with her parents.
There's Scotty and Omi, and your dad and me.
She died in a fireball.
This was the weekend before she passed away.
Despite what cliches tell you about the passage of time, it still burns.
It's just a big hole that's never even closed a little bit.
Barbara's son, Scott. His son, Scott Jr., the only grandson Barbara would know.
Do you remember her?
No.
No recall of Barbara's bear hugs and big kisses. Years earlier, same big hugs and kisses to another Edwards baby boy. That was me. Barbara Edwards was my godmother, my aunt.
I'm the only one left.
Here she was, my 1997 high school graduation.
So I got stuck in my stomach.
She was funny, sandwiched between me and my brother. Then I got busy. 4 years of college.
Just on the rest of the day.
Thank you.
That was the last time I ever saw her alive.
Bye.
A regret I never forget. It's morning in Dallas, Texas.
That's the cutest picture.
Home to the
Aww.
Scott Edwards family.
Does 9/11 play an active role in your life?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
Barbara never met her now 16-year-old granddaughter.
What is your full name?
Anna Barbara Edwards.
Anna Barbara Edwards.
Can we hold hands?
Yes.
Remembering Barbara.
A lot of energy and a lot of volume.
Loud.
Loud.
Barbara, a high school cheerleader with blue eyes as placid as the Lake Michigan water she loved. Barbara and my mom married 2 Edwards boys. They had 5 more Edwards boys. Her son Scott and I, the youngest of each family. Scott became a Marine.
Let's get out of here.
Then,
We had a mission that was going out that morning, and I just had to call the guys and say, hey, you guys shut down. All flights in the U.S. are canceled. You need to just get in here.
Scott abruptly halted drills on 9/11/2001, and his brother called.
And he just said, matter-of-factly, like, Mom and the flags were on Flight 77 and they're all dead.
Barbara was flying home with family, friends, the flags on the Pentagon plane. Terror begot war. And the Marine son, who'd just lost his mom, left a new bride, a baby boy, and broken hearts to fight.
Losing her, and then he deployed shortly after. Now it's 10 years. Things are gonna get easier, and it's 20 years, and it feels just like yesterday, and it's hard.
Scott deployed 4 times post 9/11 on the ground here in Iraq and in the air, a Marine fighter pilot.
And we were flying from Kuwait over to Afghanistan in support of the ground troops that were there at the time.
And 20 years later, it's hell. Are you angry?
I am. I'm very angry. I lost some personal friends over there. I have a friend who's flying in and out of there, getting people out.
Well, what does he say to you?
He just says it's a complete.
Use the exact words.
It's a show.
When those 13 people were killed the other day, I lost it. I can't stop feeling sad. I feel like there's nothing I can do. And I'm angry. I feel like I'm reliving 20 years ago.
20 years ago, Barbara was flying home to Las Vegas.
Tragedy struck our school,
where she taught at Palo Verde High School. They memorialized her grandly.
Present Harms!
And annually.
And I want our kids to see what an impact she has had, like, on that school.
Here we are. For the first time, 20 years. The Edwards came to thank a place that embodies not forgetting, like New York, where she's by the flags, her travel companions.
Buddy Flagg is who to you?
He was my mentor.
The reason he became a pilot. Buddy Flagg was a passenger on 9/11 on American Airlines Flight 77, but he was also a retired American Airlines pilot, a Vietnam vet, and a retired Rear Admiral in the Navy.
You knowing Buddy Flagg, would he have let that plane be taken over by terrorists without putting up a fight?
Not in a million years. I believe that he was fighting for the airplane. The specific point that they crashed in the Pentagon was a place near where Buddy's office was. That would have been the place that would have caused the minimal amount of loss of life. Now I'm a pilot at FedEx.
Scott's still delivering now when we need him in a pandemic. Still serving.
20 years. I haven't seen my mom in 20 years.
In the home where 9/11 never ends.
The reason why my dad was gone so many times, when I was little on deployments. And then obviously, having one less grandmother is tough.
Barbara isn't just a small box of earth and ashes in Hopkins, Michigan, where our families had cottages.
What are you doing, bud?
Next to each other growing up.
Look at his face with her.
He had the blonde hair.
That's the coolest picture.
The blue eyes.
I see so much of her in Anna.
It's just like hearing your favorite celebrity. You tell a little boy that you remind him just like of Spider-Man. That would mean the world to him. It feels the same way.
About being compared to Barb.
This is our last visit with her.
There is one thing, though, that Anna Barbara Edwards misses.
I just always wish she could come. And not like I had.
She misses it all. 20 years later, not everything laid to rest does so in peace. Brad Edwards, CBS 2 News.
Journalist Carol Maureen was in New York City working for 60 Minutes when the jets hit the Twin Towers. She has mixed feelings about sharing her experiences in Lower Manhattan. But now, as a professor at DePaul University, Maureen wants her students and all young people to understand what happened on 9/11 and the bravery of firefighters and police officers who rushed to Ground Zero. Over these past 2 decades,
when the second tower was struck, I headed down to West Street.
After many times describing that terrible day,
we could see coming at us a ball of flame stories high.
Carol Maureen wonders, has she talked too much about 9/11?
You go through phases where all you do is talk about it, and then there comes a point where you think, you know, it's time to stop.
But one of Chicago's most celebrated reporters, now teaching journalism at DePaul University, sees the value in sharing history one generation to another.
I've reconciled it this way. Right now, one of the things I worry about is that we will forget 9/11. My students, some of them weren't born when it happened, or were 1 or 2 or 3 years old.
It's chaos. On the morning of September 11th, Maureen, a correspondent for 60 Minutes, watching the newsroom monitor in New York, saw the planes hit the Twin Towers. She dropped everything and rushed to Ground Zero to cover it.
Jim, you know and I know, when something happens, you've got to get to the place where it's happening before police lines close it off from reporters.
There, as the second tower collapsed, a firefighter rushed to her aid.
I fell, he slammed me back up on my feet, told me to take off my shoes, and we ran under the overhang of a granite building down the way, and he covered me, he shielded me with his body. It was only after that I thought what was coming down were parts of desks and sinks and people.
A police officer led her to daylight. For days, Carol Maureen covered the 9/11 attacks for a national audience.
A rain of cinders so thick that you couldn't see this far in front of you and you couldn't breathe.
The top floors collapsed down.
Carol Maureen says some things remain the same over these 2 decades.
I'll find the other brother.
She's grateful to the firefighters and police officers who protected her, and a reporter's job is to tell stories despite the danger.
It's why I teach journalism now, because generations need to be taught how to do it. If it happened right now, we'd both go do it again. Right?
That's right.
Because that's what we do.
A Northwest suburban mother convinced her daughter to take Flight 77. She said it was safer than driving across the country alone. It is something Marian Kamenik has thought about time and time again. Dana Kozlov shares her story.
I hope I could celebrate her life and not get all melancholy, but I don't know.
That's Marian Kamenik's hope for herself when she stands outside the Pentagon, where her daughter Mary Ray Soper died in the attacks.
The greatest quality Mary Ray had was she forgave. And that's true.
The Inverness native and Fremd High School graduate was on Flight 77, headed for what Marian describes as her dream job, to become the head women's gymnastics coach at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Some of Mary Ray's last minutes captured on this Dulles Airport security video before she boarded that plane. Marian smiles and says she could see her daughter trying to negotiate with the hijackers.
I could see her saying, "You don't want to do this. You know, you think about it," and trying to talk about it. I don't think she did that, but that's how I kind of picture her.
It's a comforting image, one of many things that helped Marian get through the past 2 decades. In the ensuing years, she was passionate about sharing Mary Ray's story, even on Oprah.
She was about to start the second half of her life when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon.
And she recently rewatched the video of Mary Ray's packed memorial service at Fremd High School.
Mary Ray, I miss you, and I am so proud of you.
Where she was a state gymnastics champ before competing at Iowa State, becoming a lawyer, and joining the Navy.
Well, I learned 2 things. 1, you can't control anything. And 2, everybody's here on loan.
Mary Ray on loan for 35 years, but it doesn't stop Marian from wondering what could have been.
Would she have gotten her law license there? Would she have gone into law there? I don't know. Would she have gone into politics? I wouldn't have put it past her.
I knew Mary Ray from high school. Her sister is a friend. It was a privilege to talk to Marian about her life 20 years ago, and remains one now.
When we reflect on 9/11, we talk about love of country. But what does that look like 20 years later? Arabs and Muslims are still recovering from hate directed at them. One community activist tells Dorothy Tucker the work is far from over.
the alarm woke me up, and I snoozed it. I had it set to a radio station, maybe BBM.
WBBM News Time 7:10. It is beautiful out today. We're going to call this day Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, and that's okay by you, Tom?
And then I heard something that sounded like a dream.
At the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, you'll recall, are about 110 stories tall. It appears that an airplane has hit the building somewhere around the 85th floor. There's a lot of smoke coming out.
And when I realized that it wasn't a dream, I got ready and I sped to work.
The rush to work for Hatem AbuDhabi was rooted in fear.
We really had no idea what was happening. It was a terrifying day and a terrifying experience.
Hatem is Arab American. He grew up on Chicago's North Side, went to Catholic school as a kid and public school as a teenager. On 9/11, he was managing the Arab American Action Center in Chicago Lawn.
The president, right now, in a brief remarks, he said this was an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
I believe, if I remember correctly, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that the U.S. government believed that it was Al-Qaeda and that it was Osama bin Laden, and made the connection to them being Saudis, and immediately then we knew like it was probably perpetrated by Arabs, and if that's the case, then it's the Arab community and the Muslim community that's going to bear the brunt.
His fears were valid. Just hours after the attack in New York, outside the center in Chicago,
a big biker dude type of guy sees us, clearly Arab-looking guys, jumps off of his bike and begins verbally assaulting us right in front of the center, saying things like, "You're responsible for these murders, and you all are terrorists, and go back to where you came from." And I had heard "go back to where you came from" so many times previously. I was like, well, I come from the far north side of Chicago, if that's where you want me to go.
in the days following the September 11th attacks, hate crimes against Arabs and Muslims took place all across the city and suburbs.
Including this gas bomb attack on an Arab American group on West Columbus. Palestinian native found the words "Arab Killer" spray painted on his northwest side garage.
The feeling of fear was unmistakable.
Students in my class who feel that they don't even want to go out because they've been verbally attacked.
And the incidents continued for months. In early December, Hatem got a call. The community center was on fire.
I walked in the door here and there's firefighters all over the place. There's holes in the ceilings. I immediately thought arson.
Across the U.S., hate crimes against Arabs and Muslims spiked significantly following the September 11th attacks. In 2000, the FBI reported 80 hate crimes. In 2001, 860.
It was devastating for our community. Calling kids terrorists, women who were wearing the hijab and had it torn off.
Even those perceived to be Arab or Muslim were caught up in the ugly web of hate. In the first month following the 9/11 attacks, the Sikh coalition reported over 300 violent attacks against members of their community.
A Sikh man, not even Arab, not even Muslim, who was killed because, racists see brown skin or black skin and they don't know the difference between an Arab and a Muslim and a Sikh and an Indian.
With a spike in hate crimes, President George W. Bush cautioned Americans not to equate all Muslims with the attacks on September 11th.
Islam is peace. These terrorists don't represent peace. They represent evil and war.
These were the faces of evil, the 9/11 suspects. An FBI investigation revealed they had spent several months in Venice, Florida, where they learned to fly planes.
In this new war, our enemies' platoons infiltrate our borders, quietly blending in with visitors and tourists and students and workers. Their camouflage is not forest green, but rather it's the color of common street clothing. Their terrorist mission is to defeat America, to destroy our values, and to kill innocent people.
Less than 2 months after the attacks, legislators passed the Patriot Act, granting the government unprecedented surveillance and access to information on all citizens.
They did polls at that time. The vast, vast majority of the American public said, yes, I would give up some of my civil liberties if it meant that we were going to be safe and secure. But guess what? They're not the ones that were being asked to give up their civil liberties, right? If the vast majority of the people that are being polled in this country, because the majority of the people here are white, and all of them are saying, yeah, I'll give it up, it wasn't them that were being targeted. It wasn't them that was being attacked.
And on the heels of the Patriot Act came the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System.
What that did was it demanded that males between the ages of 16 and 64 who did not have permanent residency, who were nationals of 25 different countries, 24 of the 25 had majority Arab or Muslim population. So essentially, it was like, we want to know where the Arab men live. We want to photograph them. We want to fingerprint them. We want to interview them. And we're going to force them to come into our offices and do that.
14 years after its creation, the program was officially dismantled, critics calling it a complete failure.
You know how many people got convicted of anything related to terrorism, or charged or arrested or any of that? A big fat zero. So it was just we cast this wide net, and we cast it on top of the Arab and Muslim community, and we basically tell them, you are the enemy.
Haddam says the bias ingrained in those post-9/11 policies still runs deep.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I think Islam hates us.
In January 2017, then President Donald Trump signed an executive order barring visitors from 7 predominantly Muslim countries into the United States.
No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here.
Haddam remembers that too.
We were the organization, the main organization that organized the coalition to shut down the airport those 2 days. We got 5,000 people down at O'Hare. And we shut down a part of the airport. It was the same, I believe, the same kind of anger and frustration and apprehension that we felt, post September 11th.
This year, the travel ban was lifted. So what's changed? The numbers of hate crimes against Arabs and Muslims is down from that high of 860 in 2001 to 228 in 2020. And the community has grown. An estimated 3.7 million Arabs live in the United States. Over 142,000 live right here in Illinois.
The attacks, personal, media, cultural, and policy continue. What is different and what I believe is positive, the development and maturation of our community organizations and our institutions and our activists and organizers. We have gotten more professional, we have gotten stronger, we have gotten better at defending our community and going on offense as well. I remember vividly, and one of my biggest regrets, I made a number of mistakes in my years at this organization, but the one that I can never forgive myself for is the fact that we did not offer an immediate political analysis to the September 11th attacks. The one that I'm offering now to you, I really wish we would have done that from the get-go. I think it would have been really important to hear from the Arab and Muslim organizations who say, this is a horrible day in the history of this country, this is a horrible attack. But we need to understand context here.
It's for that reason, Haddam says, organizations like his exist to give voice to a community still recovering from the impact of 9/11. Dorothy Tucker, CBS 2 Investigators.
The moment the Twin Towers were hit, a wave of fear went through people living and working in skyscrapers across the United States. The question, could it happen here? Adrena Biggis shows us how HighRise Security has tightened in the post-9/11 world.
To better prepare for any future attacks, security consultants like Loris Friedenfelds analyzed the security and emergency response on 9/11.
We learned that there were some superhero security directors, emergency managers. Their people knew how to get out of the building in a quick manner because they drilled and exercised before that.
Friedenfeld spent most of the last decade running security and emergency management at Rush University Medical Center, now working at Telgen, which develops fire emergency and life safety systems and anti-terrorism solutions.
So after 9/11, what are some of the biggest changes when it comes to security procedures and emergency planning?
Public law enforcement and private security need to share resources.
Since 9/11, Chicago now requires high-rises to have an emergency evacuation plan on file with the city. And the tallest buildings must give the fire department their floor plans so emergency responders know what they're walking into.
So we can know who's the engineer, who's in charge of security. If there's layouts that are associated with your building, you can upload it into our FIM system.
Rich Gaitis runs Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications, or OEMC. After 9/11, OEMC became Chicago's liaison with the Department of Homeland Security, tasked with securing the nation from threats.
We have about 33,000 cameras that are tied into the OEMC City of Chicago camera network.
Cameras at public and private buildings in the city are tapped into that network. William Seiko specializes in security risk pre and post 9/11.
The better the police and fire who are responding to a problem in a building can understand the condition of that environment. The better that they're aware of what's going on, the better they can be prepared to actually deal with and save lives as they enter the facility.
On 9/11, I was on vacation in Florida. I was celebrating my mother's birthday. She woke me up and she told me what happened, and she said, "Come to the kitchen, watch the TV." At that moment, I saw the second plane hit the tower. And I said to my mother, "That's not an accident. That has to be terrorism." We would soon learn that 2 of the hijackers learned how to fly planes in Florida. They had gone to a pilot training school there. When I learned of that development, I went to our CBS affiliate in Miami to do live shots for CBS 2.
Tonight, there definitely appears to be a South Florida connection to these acts of terrorism over America.
It's a time I'll never forget.
One of our buddies, a friend of mine, said when the smoke cleared, realized we were down on our knees, and you guys helped us stand up.
We didn't want to get in their way. That's what we did not want to do. We wanted to help, but we did not want to be in their way at all.
Jay and Chick.
Retired Chicago firefighters Greg Kirkhab and Pat Maloney drove to New York City in separate groups but ended up at the same place.
This rig was crushed.
Ground Zero. The first thing Kirkhab remembers seeing was a burning hotel.
And nobody was worrying about it. And then when we walked around the other side of that, then we saw Ground Zero, and then we realized why nobody was worried about that building because of what was going on behind it.
You were overwhelmed. You didn't know where to start. I remember going to Ladder 5.
But Maloney, who retired as a Special Operations Battalion Chief, says New York's firefighters knew exactly what they needed.
A fire chief said, "Give me 10 guys, man, 2 hose lines. Rest of you start doing searches." Chicago, welcome to hell.
Hell on earth, and for about a week, Maloney's group worked near or on the pile. That's what they called the massive mound of Twin Tower debris.
Every one of us that went there in hope of finding somebody, every day.
When their work ended,
we hugged them.
Rescue now unquestionably a recovery. Kirkhab remembers meeting fallen New York Fire Department firefighter Mickey Brennan's family at a bar.
Kevin St. James was the name of the bar.
It would end up being Mickey Brennan's sister came up to me and said, "I need to thank you. I want you to come here and meet my mom."
It meant a lot, and to the country, first responders' efforts back then
lost everybody.
Meant everything.
I remember how together we were back then, people flying the flags and stuff. I wish we could have a little bit more of that today.
On September 10th, at 9 o'clock at night, I flew out of New York's LaGuardia Airport, came back to Chicago, and on the morning of the 11th, I was about to do a weather cut-in on the morning news in Chicago when suddenly the network broke in to say a plane had slammed into one of the Twin Towers. The next morning, the 12th, as I drove into a darkened Chicago, I noticed that people had hung flags over the expressway. Inspired by that, I came home and hung up my flag, and one has hung here for 20 years now. A symbol we're all in this together.
Since the day the towers fell, millions of soldiers have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, each with their own personal story. A local veteran tells Marisa Vedra about his decision to enlist.
Every day I look at pictures of Iraq, the young children and everything, and it amazes me how much time flies.
Milestones are how we measure our lives, and U.S. Army Sergeant First Class George Kakeletris shared his with us from his 2-decade military career.
I first enlisted in June of '83, actually on my graduation day from high school.
That decision took him across the world helping others, but in '87 he left the service to further his education. 14 years later, he was teaching a college course when the world changed.
On that day when that happened, everybody was horrified about the fact that both planes had hit the towers. I guess after that moment is when, I guess you can say, I got the itch that I wanted to go back.
In deciding to re-enlist, his hope was to join the newly waged war in Afghanistan. Instead, in 2004, he got orders for Iraq. Still, his goals on the ground remained the same.
I tried to show that to the people I was working with, there's a different idea about what you might have about Americans or the West.
Now back home in Wheeling, he is proud of that work, but worries what became of the children he met. It's one shared by Afghanistan veterans he knows, who feared their efforts were in vain.
Those are the issues that actually touch me. And sometimes people will look at you and say, oh, thank you for your service, but which is very appreciated, but sometimes they don't really understand what that service means.
Sergeant Kakeletris is now months away from his next milestone, retirement. 20 years since the day he felt called again to serve. In Wheeling, Marisa Vedra, CBS 2 News.
September 11th. I remember September 11th. I remember September 11th because I could not get in touch with my father. I remember the panic because I was living in Florida. My father was living in New York City, not that far away from where the World Trade Center was. And just weeks before September 11th, my mother and I were actually on top of the World Trade Center. And we replay that moment and that day all the time, still to this day. And the thing I remember sharpest, I mean, I was just 9 years old, and you have a difficult time comprehending something on that level as a 9-year-old. But I remember not being able to reach my father. And I remember all of my phone calls going straight to voicemail, and the panic of wondering if I was watching his final moments in that tower. And I am still so grateful and I'm very privileged to say that I got the good news that I was looking for later in that same day. And there are so many people who did not. And I've heard countless stories of heroism. I've heard countless stories from family members of people who didn't make it and other people who were affected. All of us were affected in some way. And because of that, I will never forget.
There are artifacts from 9/11 all across the Chicago area. Large and small, they keep the lessons of that fateful day alive. In their dignified silence, they speak volumes, urging us to move forward while remembering the past. Most often, the 9/11 artifacts are pieces of the actual Twin Towers, like this collaborative effort in downtown Des Plaines. A local firefighter welded the 114-pound girder onto a granite slab, which was donated by a local monument company. a trophy store donated the plaque.
It's truly amazing, and the thought process and the design that goes into some of these memorials, I mean, is just breathtaking.
Motorcyclist Jim Barton pays respects at 9/11 memorials from coast to coast as part of a group called Tour of Honor. We met him in Park Ridge, where a 6-foot beam from the tower stands outside City Hall with "Never Forget" written in stone. For Tour of Honor riders like Jim, the 9/11 artifacts are personal.
One of our riders is the brother of one of the firefighters killed that day.
These 5-foot beams, capped by a brass firefighter's helmet, are a connection to 9/11 here at the Carpentersville Fire Department. They're flanked by tablets with the fireman's prayer and a poem called "The Last Alarm."
And it's a daily reminder for the guys that work here that this big sacrifice was made, because memories tend to fade, and it's just good to have something to remind you. But now we have people working for our fire department who have no living memory of 9/11. And so this is a good place to start the conversation with them.
Nestled near a creek in Wheaton, 2 steel beams from the towers anchor a 9/11 memorial at Cantigny Park outside the 1st Division Museum.
Not only can you see the beam, you can actually touch the beam and really get a sense of the power of that day.
While most of the 9/11 artifacts are made of steel, others are immortalized on paper.
I wrote that I was a senior in high school.
Melissa was outside for gym class in Norwich the morning of 9/11.
And I looked up and I saw airplanes. There was at least 3 of them, and they were on their way to O'Hare.
Melissa put her memories on Post-it notes, adding to a growing display at the Schomburg Library.
And they made a U-turn around, and I noticed that was just weird. I wrote that I heard the sirens. I went inside. They brought in the TV. That's when I saw the second plane hit the tower. I remember seeing it, so I just wanted to just give my little piece.
On 9/11, I remember I was in Columbia, Missouri in college, and I was getting ready for a journalism class that morning, and I turned on the TV watching the news as I got ready and saw what was happening and just watched in shock. And then I went to class, and the professor threw out the regular lesson and decided to have us watch the coverage and discuss what we were feeling, what we were thinking, what we were seeing that was going on. And that is my recollection of where I was on 9/11.
These young faces weren't even born when tragedy struck on September 11th, 2001. Analyzing music lyrics and images helps them understand that day's impact.
Even in math classes or like other subjects that aren't related to history, there's always something that we go over to learn about 9/11.
Media coverage is reviewed in journalism class, the logistics of evacuation discussed in math. And this is Resurrection College prep after all, so students study 9/11 from a theological lens too.
How did the Catholic Church, how did other Christian-based churches respond to the victims' needs?
How do you adequately memorialize such a huge event?
Perhaps the most impactful lesson is from a primary source. Alexandra Brzezinski's cousin was a 1980 Res alum who died that terrible day.
And I think it's even more critical for the students now to know what 9/11 meant, what it represents, and that we should do what we can that it doesn't happen again.
Former cheerleader Christine Olander was the assistant general manager at the Windows on the World restaurant in the Twin Towers.
We're still waiting for direction. We have guests up here.
Brzezinski is reading some of Christine's final words from an emergency call transcript released in 2007.
Can you direct us to a certain quadrant? I mean, I could tell she was being very calm, being responsible for the 75 to 100 people.
Professionalism, caring, and a little spunk. Those qualities are looked for in the ongoing high school scholarship in Christine's name.
I think it's a great way to keep her legacy within the students at RISE.
These recent winners say the Olander family gift helps pay their tuition, and it's another reminder at school of sacrifices made before their time. More Victory, CBS 2 News.
I was in middle school at recess, and I was playing with friends and classmates, and the PE teacher blew a whistle and said we need everyone inside the gymnasium. So they brought us all inside our middle school gym on the floor, set us in the dark, rolled in an old TV, and then began to play the video. At that point, of course, as a child, I didn't process what I was seeing. I didn't understand the gravity of what was happening. So that day after school, I went home to my mom, who had retired from the Pentagon just a few years prior to the attacks, and she began to explain to me more in depth as far as what she knew about what was happening that day. And though I don't think at that point I could truly understand, from that day I would never forget what I saw.
A couple from Hinsdale was just about to adopt a second daughter when Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower. Sue Mladnick lost her husband Jeff on that plane. She was left to raise their kids all on her own.
20 years later,
it says in memory of Jeff Mladnick.
Sue Mladnick's trips to memorials,
it's kind of gut-wrenching,
aren't getting any easier.
He was just, there wasn't anything that he wouldn't do for somebody else.
Her husband Jeff had been traveling for work on September 11, 2001. He was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles. As Sue watched the news unfold back home in Hinsdale, she started to worry about her husband.
I tried calling Jeff all day. I kept leaving him voicemails. He never called me back.
She called his office to ask what flight he was on. Flight 11, they told her, American Airlines.
American would not tell me whether or not he was actually on that flight. I just said I'm not hanging up until somebody tells me whether my husband was on that plane or not. And they said, hold on, we need to get a crisis counselor. So that's when I knew.
Jeff and Sue had 4 kids together when he died. 3 biological children, and they had just adopted little Grace from China in 1998. The couple was in the process of adopting another child from China, who they'd already named Hannah.
How excited was Jeff about bringing Hannah home?
He was pretty excited.
Sue went ahead with the adoption and raised Hannah on her own. Then in 2004, she adopted Bethany, also from China. The youngest Mladnick children may lack memories of their father, but just like the rest of the family, they fight through heartache every September 11th.
I feel like all my kids, and now my grandkids, are Jeff's greatest legacy. They carry on his name. We talk about him all the time. We don't want people to forget Jeff's life was important. He mattered.
She met us at this memorial in Oak Brook called the Healing Field. There's a flag not just for Jeff, but one for each life lost on that tragic day. And behind each flag is a family missing someone they love. Tim McNicholas, CBS 2 News.
It was just a little spot on a river in a quintessential American Midwest town. The wall is a sacred place.
The wall means no one will forget their child.
If you believe that a place becomes imbued with the spirit and the soul of those who are there, that's how it becomes hallowed ground.
The Middle East Conflicts Wall Memorial was created to honor the veterans that are falling.
This memorial is 100% built by the people, for the people. We do not have 1 cent of any government help. It's all built by the veteran community, the biker community, and the small moms and pops of this beautiful country.
Our biggest concern was in consoling the fallen veterans, their families, and their comrades.
7,997 names of men and women that were KIA'd are on our memorial at the present moment.
Some of these didn't make it back home, and that's upsetting with all these names. Their parents do know. We remember them.
Nationwide, so many people have embraced this wall.
Names of those who stood up and said, "Send me, I'll go." And then all of the brothers and sisters that they served with, all of the families, they come there to remember and to honor. And somehow it has turned that little spot on the river into this magically peaceful, healing, sacred place.
We've been told over and over by Gold Stars that they did not start healing until they came here. We are taking care of the brothers and sisters that these beautiful men and women left behind. The things that they cannot do, we continue to do for them.
You see beer cans or six-pack. That means, okay, I knew you, have a drink on me. We do this so that the parents have some type of closure.
So this is an etching, my son's name, from the wall. And this is on a thin little piece of paper. But what this means is that someone took the time and found his name and carefully and gently did a rubbing and brought it home with them. So my son is going to be remembered by somebody that I don't know.
Well, this memorial to us is a living, breathing thing. It brings people in, it offers peace. It gives somebody maybe closure in some sense, and especially now, the way our veterans are feeling, is they get closure here to know that what they did meant something, and it's continuing to mean something.
When I'm there, I see my son's name in the middle of a panel with hundreds of other names. And I see that he's part of something. He's part of a long line. And he's with his brothers and sisters. And that gives me peace.
For more stories and remembrances of 9/11 20 years later, head to our website, cbschicago.com/remembering 9/11. For all of us here at CBS 2, I'm Jim Williams. We thank you for watching.